Yeah.
What you think about that?
He didn't do it.
Just like that, Charleston White dropped a bombshell, declaring David innocent and throwing out proof nobody saw coming. The internet went into shock because what Charleston revealed flipped the whole case upside down, leaving people questioning everything they thought they knew. When the story first broke that a dismembered body was discovered inside a Tesla registered to rising rap star David, the internet went into meltdown. Overnight, headlines branded him guilty, fans dissected his lyrics like they were confessions, and brands cut ties before he even had a chance to speak.
Yeah.
What you think about that?
He didn't do it.
Fuck out of here. All the evidence that's out there.
But in the middle of that storm, Charleston White's voice cut through the noise louder than anyone else's. Charleston, known for his brutal honesty and never holding his tongue, stunned the world when he straight up declared David wasn't guilty at all. He didn't just say it once. He doubled down, insisting that the biggest clue was hiding in plain sight. No arrest. In Charleston's eyes, that wasn't a mistake. That was proof. He argued that in America, especially for young black men, people get locked up every single day with way less evidence. If police really had solid proof against David, Charleston said he'd already be sitting in a cell. "They'll put you in jail just to hold you," Charleston shouted, making his audience stop and think about what that really meant. Charleston made it clear, if any random person had a body tied to them, they'd be in cuffs instantly. But David?
Listen, hold on. If they find a dead body in me and your car, and this is our car, do you think they'll let me and you stay out like long? They got out. So think about.
He was still touring, still free, still moving around in public, untouched by the law. That, Charleston said, spoke louder than any rumor or headline. And he didn't stop there. Charleston tore apart the online allegations linking David to an underage girl and her brutal death. Fans swore they had evidence, tattoos, leaked pics, even lyrics they called confessions. But Charleston wasn't buying it. He said it was all too neat, too perfect, like somebody wanted David to be the villain in this story. He forced people to think about it differently. A young black artist accused of being tied to a missing 15-year-old, a body found in pieces, and yet not even a single arrest or detainment? Charleston said that silence from law enforcement wasn't negligence. It was proof something wasn't adding up. Then he went even darker. Charleston pointed out the way the body was discovered, butchered, dismembered, hidden. He asked if David was even capable of that level of brutality, or if the whole thing looked more like a setup. "They say he sliced the body up, butchered it, and still no arrest," Charleston said, sending shockwaves across X, YouTube, and Instagram. The internet split in half. Some accused Charleston of defending the indefensible.
So think about this. If they got all this information on him dating a minor, an underage kid, and she looked like a white girl, mixed girl, what they let just stay free like this?
A man whose own car held a teenager's remains, but others started whispering the same thought. Maybe this story wasn't so simple after all. And Charleston didn't just say it once and walk away. He hammered it into his audience's heads over and over again, saying it was impossible to believe this story as it was being told. And then he pulled the ultimate comparison, O.J. Simpson. By bringing up O.J., Charleston made it clear cops will lock men up over flimsy clues. But with David, the so-called evidence was supposedly even stronger and still no arrest. That to him was the biggest red flag of all. And Charleston didn't stop there. He pushed it further into dark territory, spinning scenarios that suggested maybe someone else was behind the crime completely. Scenarios so wild but so possible that they left everyone questioning the truth. These weren't neat courtroom arguments. They were raw bombs thrown into the public like grenades, exploding across social media. And that's exactly why Charleston White's words hit so hard. He wasn't tied down by courtroom rules or polite legal talk. He spoke messy, blunt, and emotional, the exact language that grabs attention and refuses to let go. With every rant, Charleston painted a picture of a case that just didn't add up in his eyes. He even mocked the viral claims that David's connection to the victim was proven by tattoos. Fans swore the matching Esh tattoos on their index fingers were proof of intimacy. But Charleston wasn't buying it. To him, the tattoo wasn't evidence of a secret romance. It was weak gossip being blown up into headline proof that never truly held weight. And then came the line that shook the internet. Charleston turned his words toward the victim herself, using language so raw and controversial it sparked outrage everywhere. His statement wasn't just harsh, it was a grenade. Critics instantly slammed him for blaming the victim, accusing him of excusing David by tearing down a girl who couldn't defend herself. But Charleston's defenders flipped it, saying he wasn't excusing anything, he was just forcing people to question whether the narrative had been stacked one-sided against David from the jump. For Charleston, uncomfortable questions were better than blind acceptance. And he leaned heavy on the racial angle, hammering it again and again until it echoed across the internet. "They don't let black men get away with crimes like this, not in America," he declared. To him, that was the ultimate truth. If David really was guilty, he'd already be rotting behind bars, not walking free. That was why Charleston's defense hit different. While everyone else was dissecting tattoos and song lyrics, Charleston zoomed out to the bigger picture, the system itself. By this point, he wasn't just questioning the case, he was dismantling it piece by piece, daring anyone to prove him wrong. He spoke with the conviction of someone who had seen injustice play out his entire life. To Charleston, this wasn't just about one young rapper. This was about a system that had never been fair to black men suddenly acting too fair in a case that looked tailor-made for a quick conviction. Charleston's defense twisted logic in a way only he could. The body in David's Tesla, the alleged connection to a minor, the eerie lyrics, everyone else saw guilt. But Charleston looked at the exact same facts and claimed innocence. Why? Because if David really was guilty, Charleston believed the cops wouldn't hesitate to cuff him. He wasn't saying the evidence didn't exist. He was saying it was too much evidence, so much that the lack of an arrest screamed set up to him. And then he went further, painting scenarios almost no one else dared whisper. "What if this wasn't David's crime at all?" Charleston asked. "What if it was a setup, carefully staged to look airtight but actually full of holes?" Those what ifs lit the internet on fire. Some dismissed him as reckless, but others started nodding along because cover-ups and stage scandals weren't unheard of in Hollywood, and Charleston knew exactly how to keep that tension alive. Again and again, he dragged the conversation back to one undeniable truth. David was still free. "You mean to tell me a 15-year-old girl is dead? Everybody's saying he was involved, and police haven't even arrested him for questioning?" Charleston barked. To him, the answer was obvious. Because he didn't do it! And Charleston planted his flag right there. That was the hill he was willing to die on. Of course, he knew the backlash was coming. People accused him of downplaying the death of a child, excusing behavior that could never be excused. But Charleston thrived on backlash. The more people fought him, the louder he shouted. As social media tore itself apart over whether he was speaking truth or trolling for clout, Charleston doubled down. He told his audience to remember every case they'd ever seen where young black men were dragged into courtrooms with nothing but rumors, arrested on suspicion, locked up on maybe. And now, here was David's case, stacked with DNA, tattoos, songs, cars, and headlines. Yet still no arrest. To Charleston White, that wasn't coincidence, that was innocence. For millions watching, it was the kind of defense that made them stop, replay, and whisper to themselves, "Wait, does he actually have a point?" And that's why Charleston's words didn't just go viral, they became the centerpiece of the conversation. To really understand Charleston White, you first gotta know the man behind the chaos. Because Charleston isn't just another loudmouth with a mic. He's a walking contradiction, built out of crime, redemption, hypocrisy, and pure spectacle, all rolled into one. Charleston's story is already stamped with controversy from the start. Born in Texas in 1977, by the age of 14, he had already crossed a line that would haunt him forever. Involved in a fatal altercation outside a Foot Locker, a man lost his life, and Charleston was thrown into the system as an adult. Convicted of murder, he was locked up until he turned 21. That stain became permanent. Critics say it proves he's got no moral ground to stand on, while Charleston himself calls it the foundation of his mission today. After his release, he tried to reinvent himself. He launched Hypocrisy Over Politics, an organization meant to keep kids away from gangs and the streets. For a brief moment, it looked like he was walking the path of redemption, a reformed man trying to flip his darkest mistake into a warning for the next generation. But Charleston was never built for quiet redemption. His fire, his mouth, his craving for provocation, they dragged him right back into the spotlight. By the 2020s, Charleston had become infamous for his no-filter commentary. He didn't just criticize rappers, politicians, or communities. He went for the jugular, calling out people like T.I., Boozy Badazz, and more, not just attacking their music or politics, but dragging their families, their kids, even their personal lives. Every insult went viral. Every feud boosted his following. And every time, the question echoed, is Charleston White exposing uncomfortable truths, or just chasing clout at any cost? Take his wild feud with streamer Adin Ross. During a 2023 livestream, Charleston pepper-sprayed Ross's associate right there on camera. Chaos exploded instantly. That single moment became the perfect snapshot of who Charleston is: unpredictable, explosive, and completely unafraid of consequences. In another viral incident, he stood on stage at a comedy show flashing stacks of cash, taunting hecklers instead of calming the crowd, leaving audiences divided between laughter and shock. To some, it was comedy. To others, proof he wasn't some reformed activist. He was an outrage addict, a showman who thrived off chaos. That's exactly why people tuned in, because Charleston doesn't just talk. He lives in contradiction. One minute, he's condemning gangs, preaching accountability, warning kids not to throw away their lives. The next, he's mocking victims, laughing at deaths, and crossing lines no one else dares. In 2025, after conservative commentator Charlie Kirk passed away, Charleston publicly mocked his grieving family, dismissing it as white-on-white crime and laughing on camera. That moment alone showed the twisted duality of Charleston. Part social critic, part troll, all chaos. So when Charleston White speaks, people listen, either because they believe he's spitting raw truths, or because they're waiting for him to trip up and contradict himself. Either way, his voice spreads. And that's why, when he turned his energy on David's case, it mattered. He wasn't just ranting at a rapper or a politician this time. He was attacking the entire system, boldly claiming David was innocent. By the time Charleston hitched his name to David's story, his reputation was already a cocktail of scandals, hot takes, and viral explosions. He wasn't some outsider suddenly stepping into the spotlight. Charleston was already the storm, and when that storm collided with David's case, it made the whole saga 10 times louder. In early 2024, Charleston made headlines after mocking the tragic deaths of Chicago's King Von and Houston's Takeoff. He didn't mourn them. He laughed, brushed off their legacies, and called it the natural end of street life. Clips spread instantly, cementing him as the man who doesn't respect sacred ground. That was the moment Charleston stopped looking like a reformed activist. He became a professional antagonist. Then came the feud with Boozy Badazz. Charleston straight up accused Boozy of being a bad father, saying he was raising his kids into the same chaos he once lived. It wasn't just shade, it was an attack on Boozy's family. And when Boozy clapped back, Charleston escalated even harder, tossing out threats that blurred the line between trolling and real danger. To Charleston, it was just keeping it real. To critics, it looked like harassment. Not even law enforcement escaped his wrath. Charleston dragged cops, politicians, and entire institutions into his rants, burning every bridge and daring anyone to silence him. Charleston didn't hold back. He called out police chiefs, mocked entire departments, and even bragged he'd shoot any cop who dared test him. The contradictions were stacked sky high. Here was a man who built his name preaching against gang violence, yet he glorified confrontation and armed defiance at every turn. And somehow, Charleston thrived in the chaos. Every insult, every feud, every outrageous stunt, it only made him bigger. By 2025, Charleston wasn't seen as a reformed activist anymore. He had morphed into a one-man media circus. Whether it was flashing guns on Instagram Live or clowning rappers during interviews, Charleston had perfected the art of monetizing controversy. So when he jumped into David's case, critics rolled their eyes instantly. They said Charleston wasn't defending truth. He was chasing clout. And what bigger scandal could he latch onto than a teenage music star accused of murder? But here's where the paradox hit. The more people accused Charleston of clout chasing, the more traction his words gained. His defense of David wasn't whispered in backrooms. It was blasted across TikTok, YouTube, and X, where millions debated, dissected, and replayed every line. A single clipped moment of him defending David racked up millions of views on its own. Some users dragged him, others stitched his video in agreement, and thousands more left comments like, "I don't like Charleston, but he's not lying." That was Charleston's twisted power. Hated or not, people couldn't stop watching. His credibility was always under attack, yet his influence kept growing stronger. Even his biggest critics couldn't resist engaging with his content. That's why when Charleston crowned himself David's defender, the world couldn't look away. This wasn't just Charleston reacting to a headline, it was personal. For Charleston, David wasn't just another name in the news. He was a mirror, a symbol of Charleston's own scarred past, a chance to rewrite his story through someone else's trial. He had spent decades telling people that America locks up young black men with no hard proof, and he knew it because he lived it. At 14, Charleston's mistake sealed his life with a prison sentence, a permanent scar he still carried. So when Charleston looked at David, he saw the same trap he once fell into, only this time, the system hadn't pulled the trigger yet. They don't let black men get away with these kinds of crimes. Not in America, Charleston barked. And to him, those weren't just words, they were his truth. If the system had been willing to bury him alive at 14, then why was David still free if the case was supposedly airtight? In Charleston's mind, David's freedom was proof of innocence. But under the wild theatrics, there was something deeper. David, just like Charleston in his youth, was a young black man being swallowed by a narrative he couldn't control. Guilty or not, the court of public opinion had already branded him, and Charleston knew that pain too well. That was the irony. The same man who mocked rappers' deaths and laughed at victims was now positioning himself as a guardian of justice for a young star the world was ready to crucify. Whether you believed him or not, it made Charleston's involvement impossible to ignore. Because in defending David, Charleston was really defending himself. His own story of survival, his own scars, and his own belief that the system never plays fair. And while Charleston's fiery defense went viral, the case itself kept twisting in darker directions. Authorities later confirmed the body found in David's Tesla did belong to the 15-year-old girl whose disappearance had gripped the community. The details were horrifying. Her remains were dismembered, hidden in the trunk, and showed signs of deliberate concealment. For the public, it felt like a smoking gun, but law enforcement stayed tight-lipped. Reporters hammered police for answers, yet officials repeated the same cryptic line over and over. "No arrests have been made at this time." That phrase became a chilling mantra, splashed across headlines, echoed in press conferences, and whispered on social media. Meanwhile, the internet did what it always does. It exploded. The case stopped being just an investigation. It became content. TikTok sleuths tore apart David's lyrics like they were coded confessions. Songs such as Romantic Homicide were treated like diary entries written in blood. Fans went through his music videos frame by frame, swearing they saw hidden imagery that tied directly to the crime. Others lined up David's tour schedules with the victim's disappearance, pointing at overlaps like smoking guns. But here's the shocking part. Despite all the noise, no hard link was ever made public. No DNA reports, no eyewitnesses, no digital trail proving David was tied to her death. All that existed was whispers, speculation, and a mountain of suspicious but circumstantial connections. Behind the chaos, detectives were grinding quietly in the background. They were piecing together cell phone pings, digging into communication logs, and working with interstate agencies since the car, and the body, had allegedly crossed state lines. Every leak hinted at something bigger boiling under the surface. And that's where Charleston White's commentary got dangerous. By publicly declaring David innocent, he wasn't just defending an artist, he was reshaping the entire narrative. Millions of David's fans started parroting his words across social media. Hashtags like #FreeDavid and #Charleston. Said it began trending, echoing Charleston's fiery claims. That's the scary thing about viral commentary. It doesn't just react to news, it rewrites it. And Charleston had made himself the loudest pen on the page. As his defense spread like wildfire, it forced mainstream outlets to address it. Reporters who had been covering the case from a hard investigative angle suddenly found themselves writing about Charleston White, a man with no badge, no legal credentials, but a megaphone too loud to ignore. Opinion columns dropped overnight. Some blasted him as reckless, accusing him of spitting out dangerous takes that undermined a sensitive investigation. Others begrudgingly admitted his point about the lack of arrest couldn't be dismissed. Whether they hated him or not, one fact stood tall. Charleston had dragged the case into an even brighter, messier spotlight. Meanwhile, fans split into bitterly warring camps. On one side, David's diehard supporters, many of them teenagers, clung to Charleston's words like gospel. They quoted his analogies, stitched his viral clips, and repeated his mantra, he'd be locked up already. On the other side, critics raged, calling Charleston's defense an insult to the victim and her grieving family. Online fights turned vicious, with users doxing and threatening each other just to prove their side right. What should have been a solemn criminal investigation mutated into the internet's newest battlefield. Even brands got dragged into the chaos. Companies that had quietly distanced themselves from David suddenly found themselves trapped in a dangerous limbo. Should they cut ties completely and risk losing millions of fans, or wait it out, afraid Charleston might be right and David could one day be cleared? The uncertainty froze endorsements, sponsorships, and deals in place. It turned the investigation into content. TikTok sleuths broke down David's lyrics, treating songs like Romantic Homicide as if they were diary entries. Fans dissected music videos frame by frame, pointing out imagery they swore was linked to the crime. Others compared timelines of David's tours with the victim's disappearance, looking for overlaps. And yet, despite all the noise, no hard link was made public. No DNA reports, no eyewitnesses, no confirmed digital trail tying David to the victim's death. Just whispers, speculation, and a mountain of circumstantial connections. But the case wasn't frozen in place. Behind the scenes, detectives were piecing together digital records, cell phone pings, and communications. They were working with interstate agencies since the car and body had allegedly crossed state lines before discovery. Every leak hinted at a bigger story bubbling just beneath the surface. And this is where Charleston's commentary got dangerous. By publicly declaring David innocent, he wasn't just defending the artist, he was shaping the narrative. Millions of viewers, many of them David fans, began parroting his words on X. Hashtags like #FreeDavid and #Charleston said, "It started trending." That's the strange power of viral commentary. It doesn't just react to news, it starts to rewrite it. And in the case of David, Charleston White had positioned himself as the loudest pen on the page. This story is only getting messier, so don't miss what comes next. Make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe for the latest updates on this wild case.